I can't even tell you of the reluctance I felt at entering this shop of horrors. It was a curio shop filled with crystals, dream catchers, powders, candles, stones that were meant to bring luck and wellness, and bookshelves upon bookshelves of books on witchcraft, fortune-tellings, and dreams. I'd be lying if I said my eyes didn't pause on that last book. A man came out from the back at the sound of our entrance. At once I understood why Josie came to see this man every week. Black, wavy hair, almond-shaped brown eyes, fair complexion, high cheekbones. He looked like a model for male cologne. "Josie," he smiled warmly, "so good to see you. And you brought a friend." He took my hands in his, bowing over them slightly. "Welcome." "Thanks," I said uncertainly. "Marco, I apologize for the short notice. I was hoping you'd be able to do a reading for my friend here. She's in somewhat dire straits," Josie explained. My gaze snagged on a wall decoration as she spoke. A strange shield-like object, with the face of a woman set in the center. A mass of snakes swirled around her head. "Jade?" Josie called my attention, and I found them both staring at me. "I'm sorry, what is that?" I asked, pointing. Marco smiled. "That is a special talisman used for focusing chaotic energy. Interesting that you would take such a keen eye to it," he said, his gaze seeming to pierce right through me, studying me. "Come and let us discuss your problem." He turned away, stepping ahead of us, and parted a curtain behind the shop counter, which led into a small parlor. There were more bookshelves here, these ones filled with tomes on folklore, werewolves, vampires, witches, Greek and Roman mythology. Another book stood out to me, drawing me to it. It was but a plain, pale leather volume, with no distinguishing marks on its cover. I picked it up and flipped through its blank vellum pages. It was warm to the touch, and I could have sworn I felt a hum through my fingertips. Marco came up behind me, looking over my shoulder. "Would you believe that this book is also a talisman of sorts?" He lifted it out of my hands. "Used many, many years ago by monks who believed that magic lay in our very veins. They poured their blood into these pages and forged it into a powerful weapon against their enemies." "I thought you said they were monks, though." I furrowed my brow. "Aren't monks supposed to be peaceful?" "Warrior monks," he explained. "Come, sit. I'll have a pot of tea on for us in a couple of minutes." He left the parlor through another exit that led down a flight of stairs, presumably his apartment. When I went to join Josie on the cheap brown sofa, I found her staring intently at Marco's crystal ball, as though entranced. "How's my future looking?" I asked her as I sat down. I expected an eye roll, but she didn't seem to hear me. "Jose?" She inhaled sharply as she turned her attention to me, her eyes wide, as though I had startled her. "Is everything okay?" Yeah, everything is fine," she said, brushing it off. I gave her a sideways glance. "Hey, you called for this meeting. If you're seeing something, then you ought to spill too." I flicked my eyes toward the crystal ball for a moment. "Is everything okay?" Marco emerged from the stairwell, carrying a tray, bearing a teapot and 3 cups. A spicy aroma wafted over to us. "I made chai tea. That's what most girls like these days, right?" He set the tray down on the coffee table beside the crystal ball. When he sat down across from us, I noted his studying gaze once more as he looked us over. Josie still appeared to hold a somewhat vacant expression on her face, but refused to talk about it. Something about the crystal ball spooked her. "You saw something," he said. "No, it was nothing." Josie shook her blonde head, curls dancing as she did. "I'm just a little tired is all." It was an obvious lie. One that Marco ignored, and he looked at me next. "What about you? What did you see?" I shook my head. "I didn't look at it, or in it, I should say." "Well, why don't you?" he offered. "Go ahead, it's fine." He held out his hand, offering. I looked at him warily before easing forward and peering into the clear glass ball. It was a pretty paperweight as far as I was concerned. Whoever carved the dark brown wood stand was clearly talented, but as hard and as long as I stared, I could not see anything. I looked up at Marco and shrugged. Interesting. Picked up his teacup. Tell me about these dreams of yours. I looked over at Josie accusingly, but she was still lost in her trance. Something had really spooked her. I don't know what Josie told you, but... Marco waited. I took a deep breath to try again. I'm not crazy, okay? I swear. The psychic remained silent, waiting for the rest. I can't explain it. Try, he told me, crossing his long legs. And it doesn't matter how crazy it sounds to you. Trust, I've heard plenty crazy, and yours may not be the craziest that I've heard. His dark eyes searched me as though he could already see the answer. I bowed my head, focusing on my knees, and recounted the dream. Every detail, down to the black infecting ooze. The filth, clinging to every nook and cranny of the subway system, hanging off the signs and the people themselves. The woman's face flashed before me again, her hair soaked with the filth and alive with it, as if it transformed those silky black locks into tentacle-like appendages. She appeared more like a darker version of Medusa. "Tell me I'm pretty, please!" She had screamed as though her own mind had become so disconnected with what was happening to her that she began to revert to her old habits and low self-image, begging anyone to find her attractive. At the ending of my retelling, when I had gotten to the part where the woman had ripped off my arm, I saw the psychic gazing at me pointedly, not just into my face, but at my arm in question. "Do you mind?" he asked me. "What?" I responded, confused. He leaned forward and tugged at my shirt sleeve. At closer proximity he was even more handsome, and I fought the urge to pull away as he pulled my sleeve further up my arm, revealing a jagged purpling line around it. My eyes widened in fear as I yanked away from Marco, tugging upwards at my own sleeve to better see the wound I could not remember receiving. Or did I? I pulled at the neck of my shirt, peering beneath my clothing at what I dreaded to see. Yet another jagged and purpling bruise adorned my chest, the would-be spot where the filth-possessed woman had stabbed me with scissors. Marco watched me fidgeting with my clothing and raised his teacup to his lips. "It would appear that you have a remarkable gift." After taking a sip, he set the cup back down on its saucer. "Astral projection has never been done at such great distances," he shrugged. "Not that I can recall, anyway. Astral—" I struggled with the words. I understood them, but I couldn't believe them. "Are you shitting me? I didn't project myself," I spat. "I had a goddamned dream." "Dreams do not typically brand a person with such injuries," Marco said, gesturing to my arm. "With astral projection, one can even attempt to connect to another living being," he explained. "In your case, you connected with... what was her name again?" It occurred to me then that I never learned the name of the girl in whom I had been gazing through. She had been butchered by that madwoman. I'd seen it and felt it just as she had. I had heard the voices from the filth whisper in her ears, and the infection set in fast. A nameless woman whose face I had never laid eyes upon. My mind went back to the many faces and names listed in the news reports. She must have been among them. "You don't know," Marco surmised. "Tell me," he laced his fingers together. "Have you had any dreams involving a large tree? Or maybe bees? A rocky shoreline where two strange beings are arguing with each other, and with you, over whose voice of reason was the most... what's the word?" He leaned forward, searching my face for the proper expression. "Trustworthy." He was waiting for me, expectant. I knew those words were supposed to mean something, and I wanted to answer, but I was afraid. Strange as they were, I'd seen these images. All of them. And somehow he knew it. I dreamed that I'm on a rocky shoreline, as he says, with strange astronomical forms spinning and swirling lazily in the sky. They appear as a large asteroid belt, surrounding the world in perfect clarity. I can almost see the surface of each and every moon that moves among them. The sky is so bright with stars that there's no need for a sun. A woman stands to my right and a man to my left. The woman, dressed in pure white with shimmering silver hair, tells me to be wary of the voices, for they can corrupt. The man, dressed in black with strange markings on his face, makes a devilish smirk and claims that the voices are to be trusted. For they speak the truth, he whispers. I am struggling to understand their riddles when from their hands a colony of bees amasses and begins to cover me, lifting me off of my feet. The air is so dense with them that I can barely breathe, and when I do open my mouth to take a breath, they invite themselves in, swarming down my throat. I am choked by their bodies, their stingers. My throat swells, and I can no longer take in air. I'm suffocating. I look at Marco and inhale deeply before I answer him with, "My, isn't that specific?" Marco merely smiles. We are both startled when Josie finally speaks with a heavy tone. "Yes," she says, as if she's been holding her breath. My head turns so fast that I can feel the muscle wrench. "Josie?" I stare at her in surprise. I had been completely unaware that Josie had been hiding her own secrets. All those times I had shared my dreams and nightmares, my visions, she had been having her own. My gaze flicks towards the crystal ball. What did she see, I wonder? "Josie?" I say her name again. Her eyes finally find mine, but only for a moment, almost as though she were afraid I would see what she saw, and so she settles for looking over my shoulder, eyes unfocused. "What did you see?" I ask. She takes a shuddering breath as she glances back at the crystal ball for a moment, then quickly looks away. Her hands fidget with her hair, pushing them back behind her ears, and then settling into her lap before she's wringing them around the hem of her maroon-colored tee. "I saw a fishing boat," she says quietly. I'm waiting for her to continue, while she appears to avoid looking into the crystal ball. The glassy surface seems to call to her, and then once again her eyes go blank and empty, and she is entranced by the object. But she doesn't stop talking. "There is a horror story bobbing in Kingsmouth Harbor. Listen," she intones, her voice taking on a monotonous sound. "They thought the fishing boat lost. Then it returned to the port, weeks overdue. It brought no relief. It brought no comfort." Her head slowly turns to me, and I see her blank eyes now appear pure white, her irises and pupils completely gone. "It only brought the fog." My stomach clenches at her last two words, and I find myself remembering another nightmare. The fog. Creatures hiding in the distance, obscured by the thick gauze-like mist that surrounds, hunting me as I try to escape, try to hide, because once you are caught in that blinding whiteness, there is no escape. Only death or tortured dreaming wakefulness. You become one of them, one of the creatures that hunt in the fog, and it never ends. As Josie speaks, I can see her vision playing out before me, an old fishing trawler with a name emblazoned along its side proclaiming her to be the Lady Margaret. As she sails, a fog bank is forming behind, following. The ship is caught in a storm. I see the men aboard trying to keep the vessel aloft. One of the sailors goes overboard, swept away by a swell. I hear the men scream for him as the waves pull him away beneath the surface. Hours pass and the storm calms. When the sailors gaze about themselves, they find they are lost. They find that they have been taken in by the fog. Their instruments, their radar, their phones, nothing seems to work. Days have passed and the men are nearly driven mad, until finally the fog begins to lessen. What is that? A man stands on the ship's prow, gazing into the mist. A light is beckoning him, singing to him. It glows like a star, and the man is drawn to it. He dives into the murky waters, where hands caress him and bodies latch onto him, whispering in his ears. He retrieves the glowing item. As the other sailors are calling to him, screaming at him to return to the ship, they fear for his life. When he returns to the boat, the men gaze upon the artifact with reverence. They were as though they were meant to find it. The Lady Margaret's instruments came back to life. The engine started and the fog dissipated. The men steered their way home, unaware that they were bringing the fog with them, and with it, a new kind of hell. I awake with a start. The room is dark and quiet. Josie is asleep on the other side of the couch. When I open my eyes, I see the crystal ball still sits on the coffee table, but it has been covered by a small square of silk. I check the couch's surface to be sure it wasn't damp. Most of my nightmares end in profusing sweating, an embarrassing symptom. Thankfully, it's dry this time. I sit up and look around, astounded to see that night has fallen. How late is it? I'm not sure. I move Josie's feet from my legs and stand. There's a clock hanging over the curtained-off front of the store, though in this darkness it's difficult to see. I step closer. 10 o'clock? No, no way! I hurry to Josie's side and shake her. "Josie," I hiss. "Josie, get up! We fell asleep!" She opens her eyes with great difficulty, and my presence seems to confuse her. Even more when she looks around herself and sees her psychic's darkened sitting room. "Where are we?" she asks with a tired voice. "Josie, we need to leave now." The urgency in my voice seems to waken her, and we grab our purses. Tiptoeing through the curtain, afraid of making any noise on our exit, I remove the bell from the top of the door frame and quietly shut the door behind us. We've only walked a half a block before Josie finally speaks again. "We arrived there at 10 this morning, right?" she asks. Her mind is trying to work through the events of the day. "Yeah," I answer. "You said it was chai tea in those cups, right?" Josie nods, following my thought. "Did he pour them in front of us?" I ask. I think so. I saw him drinking from his cup," Josie said. "What was his name again?" "Marco," she says. "His full name!" She pauses, trying to think. "I don't think he told me." "Okay. Well, Marco is not going to hear from either of us." I stop Josie and turn her toward me. "Ever again," I say. "You cannot go back there. Something happened. We both started seeing things after we drank from those teacups." Josie's looking doubtful. "I didn't have any, though, I don't think." It suddenly occurs to me that I don't remember drinking the tea either. I shake my head and look at her again. "It doesn't matter. I don't trust him. Say it with me. We are never going back to that ship again." Josie stiffens under my hand. "Ship. The Lady Margaret." I feel myself go still at the mention of its name. "You said ship. We weren't in a ship. We were in Marco's shop." "The shop. Yes, that's what I said," I stammer. "No, you said ship." I let go and start walking away from her in the direction of the car. "Jade!" she calls. "You saw it too. You saw the fog." Her voice echoes in the streets. I stop walking and listen. The streets have become so quiet now. I can hear distant footsteps, those of Josie's and someone else down the alley across from us. A car passes a block away. A trash can tips over from the local wildlife digging within the refuse. Then a whisper comes to my ear, and I flinch away. "What's wrong?" Josie asks, and I turn around. "Nothing," I say. "Let's just get off the streets. Let's go to your house." "My house? Why my house?" she asks. "Because I don't feel safe in my house." I shiver, then under my breath, too many dark spirits lurking there. I look over my shoulder. "And I'd rather have a friend with me." Josie nods and catches up as we approach the car. She gets in the driver's seat and turns the engine over. I'm staring off into the distance when I see a man in heavy clothes staggering through the parking lot. At this point, everyone looks suspect to me. I look to Josie. "Drive," I say quietly. She nods again, mutely, and we pull out of the lot to the comfort of a brightly lit second-story condo with dream catchers set in the window frames, and 2 affectionate cats to greet us at the door. "Hey, Reese," I say, relieved to be there. I pat her head and remove my coat, hanging it with my purse in Josie's closet. Got anything to drink, I ask? Josie makes her way into the kitchen. I don't know about you, but I'm not sleeping tonight. She comes back around the corner with 2 glasses and a bottle of rum. And I keep this here for when you come by. So yes, she puts them on the table and departs to retrieve a couple cans of soda. I do. You're a saint, I say as I fill my glass. Josie steps to her movie cabinet as I take a sip of my strong mix of rum and Dr. Pepper. My gaze is pulled to those dream catchers now. I sure hope they work tonight, I think to myself. All that time I had been stuck in the dream world, witnessing that fishing boat being lost at sea, and yet I still feel exhausted. I took another swig. Josie was putting in a DVD of a popular sitcom. Take our minds off the nightmares, and hopefully they won't come back. She left the room one more time, and I turned to see her come in with an incense burner and some dried green herbs. Sage, she said with a shrug. Just to be safe. Just don't set off the smoke detector. I turned it off, she said. Temporarily, she said when she caught my look. It won't kill us, she sighed. It was about 4 in the morning when I finally drifted off, dreamless and restful. Bliss. The rum, light comedy, and pungent smell of burning sage worked its magic. When I awoke the next day, it was 12:30 p.m. No regrets. I staggered off of Josie's couch and stepped into her kitchen to start her coffee maker. When I went to check on her, I found her awake in bed, trying to muster up the motivation to leave the comfortable warmth of her comforters. All in all, a pleasant morning, or afternoon, I suppose. Josie's cell phone began to chime with her favorite song, and she reaches to her bedside table to answer it. I step back to the kitchen to pour the aforementioned coffees. When I don't hear the conversation continuing after that first hello, I assume it's just a telemarketer, and she had hung up. It was only when I entered her bedroom once more that I see it was not the case. I hung up on him, she says to me with wide eyes. I couldn't say anything to him. I didn't know what to say to him. Who? I ask. I placed a coffee on the bedside table. She's quiet for a moment, and I realize who she's talking about. What did he say? He said, I want my bell back.